And so I think since we're 3 minutes past the hour and a couple of us are already pressed for time, we will call this meeting to order. So I'm going to do that. Ladies, gentlemen, this is the City of Charlottesville Housing Advisory Committee regular December meeting, the last meeting of 2021. Welcome. The chair notes by eye that we have a quorum of voting members here, a majority of the voting members, so we'll declare a quorum unless there's an objection. Ms. Kelly, I did receive news from LD that he was not going to be able to scope in today. So, and then I'm not sure who's driving on the Zoom side of the thing, but Sunshine just poked and said he doesn't think he's a panelist. Could somebody please promote him?
I think I see Ms. Parks there.
Ah, there. Yes, I do see Ms. Parks. And now I see Sunshine, so I think that's been resolved. Excellent news. Okay, we are live. We are going. This is going to be something of a truncated agenda today, more perhaps approaching something like an annual review, but I don't think too much depth on that at the moment. I will call your attention to our last meeting, which I believe was a couple of months back, and the minutes in the portal. And if you want to review those, that would be helpful. So, and Ms. Parks, I believe a couple of people are missing their invites. I just got a poke from Gary Palmer saying that he did not receive one. So if you could fire one off, that'd be helpful.
Can you repeat who I need to send it to?
Gary Palmer, developer.
Okay.
Greetings, Dan. All right.
Chair, I'll move to approve the minutes.
I can second that.
That hearing none, minutes approved. So I'm going to change up the order on the agenda just slightly today, and sort of and move a UVA update to the front of the line. This is because Alice has indicated that she is on a relatively tight timeline today. So I thought I'd give her the upfront slot, and then we'll move on to updates from the city county subcommittees and CIP, not necessarily in that exact order. So as we all know, I believe UVA has an update.
Thanks, Phil. Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to bring your attention to the news release, if you hadn't seen it yesterday, that the university has published the 3 sites that will be up for consideration for potential affordable housing developments. As you can imagine, it's not something we do every day. So getting to this point where we identified sites, working with the community and our advisory group was, pretty engaged, pretty robust discussion. I'm happy to pull up the map as well as the sites, in detail if, this committee is interested, but just wanted to draw your attention to that in case you hadn't seen the news.
Great, thank you. For those of us who've seen it, any questions or follow-up for her at this point?
Any sense of next steps?
Yep. Well, our next steps will be to publish an RFQ, right? A request for qualifications for developers or teams that have proven track records of developing affordable housing. And from that, we will issue a short list and then ask for proposals for, I'm certain it's financial plans. I mean, we're a little bit down the road for that, for the proposals, but because I believe the actual physical plan will be part of a community engagement process. So the first step will be to publish the request for qualifications to find developers or development teams. But we've been working with our UVA Foundation, so they'll be the body that actually publishes the RFQ.
Ellis, could I ask a question?
Of course.
So little unclear, although it may be the reporting or the press release, but there seemed to be a couple of suggestions that none of the land that's utilized is available for ultimate disposition, that it will all be subject to a long-term ground lease. And that's in relationship to, I know that there was a lot of push for home ownership among the stakeholders. That seems to limit it to only one kind of home ownership, which is split land improvements home ownership. Am I reading that wrong, or is that true? There is no possibility of home ownership of the land for folks.
Yeah, well, so Dan, I don't think I'd go as far as to say there's no possibility, but I would say that the proposal is for ground lease at the moment. And whether it's ground lease for rental units or whether it's a land trust model for home ownership on, long-term ground lease, I don't know that we've gotten that far yet. And just from a practical standpoint, it's a lot easier to offer foundation land for sale than state land for sale.
Right.
So we're still working through that. So,
I'm sorry, which of the three are foundation lands and which are state lands, or is it a combination?
Yeah, well, so Piedmont is all state. The university owns all of Piedmont. The foundation owns all of North Fork. And then the Wurtland and 10th, because there's a little wonky dividing line between what the university owns and what the foundation owns, there's a portion of each on that one.
Gotcha.
So, but I would say that the direction that we've received, from our leadership at the moment is long-term ground leasing. But we have, we have clearly heard the community feedback, and we understand it, but we probably are just not there yet. But
Gotcha.
that's
Well,
not to
if I
say
can
that
do
it's never in the possibility, the realm of possibility.
Gotcha. Well, if I can do anything to help in that matter, to help educate people, I'm happy to, such as projecting out the amount of equity gain, the ability to repurchase, et cetera, for families, and sort of track that over time. I'm happy to do some research. Obviously, I mean, I know this comes across as greasing our own skids because we're a home ownership organization, but it's more than that. I've heard from people as well, and that the inability to earn equity off land is one of sort of the original sins in Charlottesville that I know that the president and the university are really serious about combating. And my own personal opinion, which is stoked by what we've heard when we've had lots of listening conversations with people, is restoring people's ability to gain equity from land is a critical component of essentially the kind of housing-based societal reparations that the community was excited about this initiative for. So if there's anything I can do to sort of either bolster that argument or at least lay it out, I'd be happy to help.
Well, I would say thank you. I appreciate that. We appreciate that. I would say two things. One is that, this is not the last time. Obviously, we're going to have community engagement. We're going to have community engagement all the way through. So the more, we understand the community needs, it may change direction. I can't answer that at the moment. But the other thing is, hopefully, we're not the only institution that is involved in this effort, which I know is not the case. So that if we provide one type of, of housing, other institutions in the city and the county can certainly, provide others. So we hear you. This is the direction at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also, has the university determined what length ground leases they'd be amenable to? Is it 99-year or something shorter?
We, to be honest, Frank, we haven't gotten that far. We're, again, I have to stress that this is not something we do every day. I know many of you, it is something that you do every day. So we've been, taking baby steps and, to some, maybe a long time to get here, but it's still positive progress. But I have heard long-term ground lease. We haven't stipulated what that long-term means.
I would like to just simply echo Dan's statements about the importance of making homeowners whole, including the land, especially as African Americans in their history in the city of Charlottesville. I think it's vital that that is a part of the homeownership, full homeownership conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Phil. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about
Alice,
this.
I think you want to jump in for a sec.
Is it
Alex, were you
City
jumping in?
Storm? Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Alice, thank you for the update. I read that in the newspaper, and then I get a prior privilege notification before I hit the newspaper. So I completed my own survey, comments, feedback on your website. So I appreciate that update. The big update from the city, some of you may know, last night.
City update?
Oh.
Go right ahead, Alex. I guess we're moving on.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Appreciate your help.
Okay. It's last night, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the 2023 to 27 capital improvement plan. There were several amendments, proposed amendment by the Planning Commission, reduction, increases, and what have you. So that recommendation is being worked out right now by a budget office in readiness for city council consideration. So that's going up to the city council, and then a council will decide whether to reduce certain line items and increase certain line item as recommended by the Planning Commission. So that is a big update from the city. The other couple of updates from the city is the city has hired, I don't have detailed information here. Perhaps some of you may have read it through the lists provided by the city and then in the newspaper. The city hired a new director of Parks and Recreation Department and also a new director of Public Works Department. So those two positions have been filled. That completes my update from the city, unless somebody has any question.
Chair, I have some questions.
Sure, fire away.
Alex, it's been a long time. I don't know, maybe you can tell us how many months since we've had a housing coordinator in the position. Can you update us on the hiring of that position?
That's part of the discussion right now between the deputy city manager and the city council. If you guys logged in at the last discussion with council during the 4 p.m. meeting, so that is being discussed, and the position may be revamped a little bit, so we'll be able to get what we need in terms of implementation of the affordable housing plan. So that is being discussed at this time.
That, I heard some of that discussion at the work session, which was last week in reference to the restructuring of the hack, which was let's just say it was a compelling conversation and fascinating in a lot of ways. But that was in part, and Mr. Sanders made the point that part of this had to do with expanding the role of that person and also seeing what sort of human capital the new housing, personal infrastructure inside the city needs to have in terms of staff, what needs to be added and in what order. And he is in part making the argument that the housing coordinator position be one that is sort of farther up the management chain than it is presently structured and such. So that's that was sort of the thrust of his conversation. I did not get any sense from anybody in that meeting about a timeline for either the proposed changes to the hack or exactly on the hiring. It's just he wanted direction and then was going to start moving. Is that your sense, Alex?
Yeah, the hiring right now, that will it will take some time, in other words, through the budget session. But I think the hack recomposition and the CAF review committee and things like that, that may happen perhaps much quicker. But there was not some kind of immediate timeline direction from the city council. I think the deputy city manager is looking for clear directions so she can start moving from point A to point B. Hopefully after the next meeting or 221s that's going on right now, maybe you will be able to flush out all that clear direction, and then we take it from that point.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm sure that if we're asked, the current membership of the hack would be happy to provide whatever insight we think to the operating of the organization. So hopefully some sort of inquiry will be forthcoming at some point about that. Just as a personal editorial, I'm not sure that when we are scrambling to get basic staff in place to do a $150 million lift, that the idea right now is to try to redesign the airplane in flight. But that's just me. But I'm sure there'll be plenty of time to have that discussion as we move forward.
Chair, sorry, can I?
Yes, sir.
Question also, unless I would offer kind of the same observation, Phil, that I think we've been without a year in that position, and it seems like unfortunately the team is understaffed, and I would hope that there would be hiring.
I can barely hear you.
Sorry, I would just make the observation too, Phil, on the response that I think the position's been unfilled for more than a year, and the team seems to be understaffed, and for the asks that we're asking them to do, and I would hope that filling the position is being prioritized. Second question, sorry, on the city update is, when is the CAF expected to be, RFPs expected to drop?
Yeah, we're, as you folks may know, we have a consultant looking at the performance review and the program design. They're scheduled to provide a city council an update on the 20th of December. And subsequent after that, they complete task 2 of the contract. And that task 2 will include taking a look at the instruments like agreements, the NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, structured reporting requirements, and other associated policies, and then making recommendation or providing a template that we can use for those activities, So once they complete those, we are hoping that by tail end of January, that they'll be able to at least substantially complete that. And then early February, we are looking at issuing the notice of funding availability at that point. And then folks can submit their proposal.
So Alex, I think, I guess my question to follow up on Chris on this is that we've known for months that we have $850,000 sitting in the CAF now. We do have a process that is equitable for processing these things and moving forward with it. The sense that some have, this sort of vague notion that some people have said that some people are upset about transparency. I mean, great, glad to work on that piece of it, but it seems to me that what you said was, we're going to wait for the consultants to tell us how we've done, and then we're going to have the consultants design a program for future for this allocation. And meanwhile, we're not going to really be able to do anything with this money until after that. And I would suggest, and I don't know to whom I suggest that besides you, that we ought to push this money out now, and that waiting to start thinking about pushing the money out to start issuing things in February and March means money doesn't really get decided until June, July, which means. And I'm sure there are people standing around with their shovels right now who would like to get their hands on that. So anything we can do to move that process along and at least segregate the money that we have got sitting there now, and that has been sitting there now, moving it forward, I think would be helpful. But I mean, I don't know if there's anybody else here who's with me on that particularly, but I think we've got it. It's 800 grand. Let's not wait till the end of spring to do something with it. That's my suggestion, but I'm perfectly happy to be, well, not happy, but someone's going to slap me down on that. Go right ahead. Oh, come on, what an opportunity.
Just a warning, just in case I get cut off. I'm getting
Yes,
a
sir.
warning from IT, city department, that my laptop could restart itself. So just in case, I just want to warn you guys. So, well,
I didn't want you to hang up on me. I was just asking.
No, you can, and I'm just, I'm getting a flag, yeah, you can follow up with Sam Sanders on that, but your point is taken, and this is not the first time I got such feedback in terms of putting the previous allocation on the street, but the deputy city manager has discussed this issue with the city council, and it's their preference that we consolidate the CAF funding and then wait until after we get the instrument, then we can issue a NOFA and then take it from there.
Chair, this is Chris. Can we?
Hold on, I think I thought I saw somebody else with a hand up.
I'm sorry.
I was wrong. Never mind. Just proceed. Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
I'll just say, can we maybe, I'd like to have a further discussion and hear other inputs from the Housing Advisory Committee on this so that we can provide maybe some timely advice. I personally, and I think Leap's position would be very much aligned with yours, and I'm wondering where others might sit on this, and if we have time at the end of the meeting to discuss it a little bit, I would like to hear other people's opinion. I similarly am concerned that we have a chunk of money that's sitting there and not being utilized to assist people now who can be assisted now. So thank you.
Thanks. I believe Nancy, did you have your hand up there?
No,
Nancy?
that's okay. Thank you. No.
Okay. Councilor Payne.
Yeah, just throw in my 2 cents in speaking individually.
Live now, inflation and all.
Obviously, if you're talking about a time frame from 20th when we're getting that initial report, if you're talking about a time frame of between like now into mid-January, that to me is acceptable. But pushing it out much farther from there, I think, has a lot of downside and is not the timeline I think we need to be pursuing. The last I had this conversation, my memory was that the timeline was between mid-December to mid-January, following getting that report from the consultants in terms of that money going out. And my thought would be, ideally, we would still stick to that timeline.
All righty, sir. Thank you. Any further comment on this at this point?
I would just, second Chris's request and appreciate Counselor Payne keeping pressure on moving this forward. I know that there are others, but we've made numerous requests over the last year or so. We have a project sitting out there that needs this funding to then leverage. We haven't been able to apply for federal and state funding that needs a city local match for it. So there are multiple units that are sitting out there that can't get money because this is stopped up. And so it's, at first it was an inconvenience. Then it got to be something that was a matter of urgency. I think we're entering emergency mode. And if that's true for my agency, it's likely true for other agencies as well, especially with LIHTC applications coming up. So thanks, Counselor Payne, and please do whatever you can to keep forward momentum on this because the house is burning.
Thank you, sir. Anything further on this point?
Yeah, I'll just
Record, I
say,
support Chris.
Go ahead. Sunshine, then Ridge, just because of where you are on my screen.
sorry, Ridge, to speak over you. I just echo what's already been said and just highlight from the LIHTC perspective. I think folks probably know this, but just to put it on the record, we have 2 projects in the wings right now on the pipeline for LIHTC funding and LIHTC applications. One of them we have strategically decided to push until the March 2023 timeframe, which is the Park Street Christian Church. And there are numerous reasons why that all make strategic sense. But we are still pursuing the MACA redevelopment site for March 2022. And I have said this to folks around the board, but if the funding is not there, the project is dead. It cannot move forward for 2 reasons. One is the funding gap itself, and 2 is that the funding, similar in some ways to what Dan referenced, it's not considered matching funds, but it's considered subsidy. And without those subsidy points in the LIHTC application process, it is fundamentally non-competitive or uncompetitive. So I'll just reiterate that too.
Would it be useful to hold a vote on a recommendation on this?
Yes,
I would like
so.
to.
But Ridge was going to step in as well, I think.
No, I was just echoing, if people were looking for feedback, I was just saying, yes, let's push it forward.
Okay. Yes, Lisa?
So the report is due out on Monday, correct?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Update is due on Monday to council. Consultant will be discussing update to council.
So you're not anticipating a decision on Monday as to how you should move forward from the consultants?
No,
Okay.
it's an update.
So I just want to be clear if we're about to take a vote on this, because I definitely would be interested in their feedback and their update to hearing that and how much anticipated additional time that's going to be required. I mean, there's no financial gain for me in my decision. So I want to present that other particular perspective. So I would be interested in knowing what they said and in terms of an update, but I fully understand organizations that need the money and need the funding. But I'm just looking for the common good.
a general question, not, you know, to Alex, but to the providers as well. I mean, is there a downside to issuing and getting going with some general parameters so we can get some people to work? I mean, it seems to me that this deep dive into the efficacy of these various programs is about the results over time, and that information can be available by the time we've got the proposals in. So there isn't, you know, and that may change the decision-making on submitted proposals, but I don't see why we should truncate the time, you know, why we should push out a timeline to even get started on, you know, getting ideas, proposals, and money requests in through the front door, even, you know, even if we're not 100% certain that all of the criteria are all of the criteria. I mean, that's the danger. But on the other hand, if we want to get some better intel on performance in the past stuff, I mean, we do that anyway under whatever circumstance we could find. So to Alex and the other providers, what's the downside to pulling the trigger on making, you know, calling for proposals for this $830,000 tomorrow? Yeah, I mean, if we do that, we're still not even making decisions until March.
Can I ask something? Would we be setting or implying that because we're accepting those, that you're almost implying that you're going to get funding? Or are you saying
No.
something else?
No, I'm saying that we say, here, we've got $830,000, send us proposals to how to spend this money. People can send the proposals.
I think,
Make the decisions. I mean, you know.
yeah, I just wanna, if you are going to make a vote, I think I would suggest that your reference be the existing appropriated CAF money instead of saying 850,000 or what have you, you know. So
I'm not even sure what the exact number is. It's somewhere between 8 and 850. Brenda may be able to scratch up something to the penny, but I mean, for our purposes now, I don't think it's critical. But
So to make
I
sure
want to
I'm
clarify,
clear.
Alex. I'm sorry, Alex. So you're suggesting that if there's a motion that it specifically references what's in the fund now and maybe even references that before new money is put forward, then you take the results of the consultant's report into consideration. I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right.
no, I'm not. No, I'm clarifying one thing. I just want to, because I had the chair saying 850. So I just I don't know exactly what the balance is, you know, but if you want to make a motion, you know, you guys can make a motion about existing allocation. Just put existing allocation, you know. I'm not telling you to make a motion. I'm just trying to steer you guys away from saying it's 850 or 870 or 750
Gotcha.
and stuff like that.
Oh, I see. That makes sense. Thank you.
I just have a question about a point of clarity. The proposal is to start receiving the applications, and we are not going to start having conversations about allocations. Is that correct? I just want clarity.
yes, ma'am. What I'm suggesting is that when the city starts making these decisions, even if Alex, when his computer reboots, goes immediately to updating RFP document templates and starts publishing today, that even so, no decisions are going to be made on that money until March. And we're going to have all sorts of data coming in between now and then. But if we wait on the data until February, where we digest it, we think about it, we talk about it, okay, now let's go looking for money. That then we're talking about pushing out the requests then and not making decisions on who's doing what until the middle of the summer or later. And it seems to me we might as well say we got $800 and some odd thousand today. Start making suggestions, and then the city will gather its intelligence on productivity and make decisions about the best way to spend it once we have the data. So yeah, essentially I'm just saying let's get rolling.
let's start receiving
That's
the
right.
suggestions, no decisions about
Proposal.
allocations.
Correct.
Or are you suggesting that we're going to start having conversations about the applications that we're already starting to receive?
Not until whatever that period closes, and then we've got to figure out, we don't know what our
Okay.
exact timeline is at that point.
Okay. I just
think.
don't want to create an environment where individuals who are submitting their information to be considered for funding, assuming that we are already looking at and making considerations and just waiting for the report, because I think that would be prejudicial if we do that, not knowing the full report, what the update is going to entail on Monday. I'm in total agreement with starting to receive that information.
And
How
of
do
course, the
you,
timeline isn't quite that, it isn't quite that tight. I mean, realistically, the request would probably go out if we did a full court press to get started. The request is not going to go out until January anyway. Even if we do a
how
full
do
court
you,
press.
how do you submit application where, I mean, you don't know what the city's priority is, or what the city will put in the NOFA, whether the city is looking at strategic approach to investing its money, so that we minimize people spending a huge amount of time to submit application that nobody will review. So how do you, I'm trying to see how this will happen. People just submitting application, then when we are ready to issue a NOFA, are they gonna go back to correct whatever deficiencies in the applications are, or
No,
how do you do that?
So, one, I'm kind of making this up as I go along. Two, my suggestion would be that the NOFA be, I mean, the NOFA is fuzzy anyway. We have prior year priorities. I don't see for this amount of money that we're going to take a radical departure for this 800 and some odd as to what our priorities might be. And let's do the best we can and not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and produce a NOFA that's based on our ongoing priorities is our best guess. And it's not a whole lot of money, but there are people who need to start to move on it. And then with our next round, we should have it all together. But right now, essentially what we're saying is we're not going to spend money on housing, not because we're out of money, not because we're not going to have more money coming in, but because we've sort of constipated ourselves with some data. And I just don't, I'm just not sure that that's, considering that the building's on fire, that's the smartest thing we could possibly be doing. I'm perfectly prepared to be smacked down on this. This is not my neck of the woods. But got
But if
several
we
people
haven't
hands up
been
who is.
properly allocate, I'm sorry, Phil, but we haven't been properly allocating and don't have, and we're not funding initiatives that have been producing the results that we say we want. That's important information.
I agree, but it's not as if we don't have any data. We have a great deal of data. We do not have a data we do not have a deep dive, fully integrated, sliced and diced to the beginning of time evaluation. But we have some, I mean, we produce, the HAC, or the Housing Program Coordinator, produces an annual report every year, number of units generated, money spent, money in, money out. We've got a sense. We haven't been in the dark here. It's just that if we're applying what is presumably going to be a better methodology, that doesn't mean the methodology we've got is worthless or isn't even good. But that to wait for us to develop a new set of priorities and procedures and policies for this money, which has been sitting there and sitting there and sitting there, doesn't seem to me to be productive. I think that we should move forward as best we can, knowing that it's going to be imperfect. That's my thought. Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, I'll just.
I got so many hands going up and down and popping in and out here. I'm just trying to keep track.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
A couple of things. One, I do think we can we should move the process forward. And to Lisa's point, all right, I don't think we should be judging on any proposals, but we should be receiving proposals and starting that process. We have an affordable housing plan, right? Which I think we should utilize. And to Alex's point is that should be probably guiding how the allocations should work, I assume, of a set of activities that the city wants to see done, right? I will just say in general, and I'm not saying this was being insinuated or anything like that, but LEAP is not going to propose for general support, for example. It would make a proposal for low-income energy efficiency retrofits, which are listed as a priority in the affordable housing plan. Whether you give it to LEAP or you give it to somebody else to get done, I don't care. I just want to see things get done because I know there are households and other folks who need assistance with housing. So, but we're sitting on a chunk of money again that is not being utilized while people need to be assisted. So, waiting for the perfect, is I think we're, again, unfortunately, negatively impacting people by delaying further. So I would suggest, again, at least how Chair you framed it, right, we don't need to prejudge any proposals, but we should start the process of getting the proposals so that we can move a little bit quicker when we do have the final report. And those who will be reviewing those proposals, who are independent from any of us who would be submitting a proposal, can have that information and utilize all the other information they need to make their decisions. Thanks.
Lyle, I think you were up next.
Here, I have a motion.
We definitely would need to restate the motion because there's been a lot of discussion in between.
I haven't stated it.
I don't even think we got a
There was
motion
one
out
on
there
the
yet.
table.
May I state it?
All right, everyone brace yourselves.
I move that we recommend that the city solicit proposals for the existing CAP funds as quickly as possible. And I've also pasted that in the chat.
Okay. Any discussion of that? There's a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion or second of it as stated? Give it a whirl here.
I second it.
I would like to add something. So to Alex's point, when we start to receive those applications, those requests coming in, is anybody going to be looking at them for errors in the application? Or are we just going to wait at that time for allocation?
Well, I would
Because we
think that
then
this
have
would
them
be,
in possession.
yeah, I would think that this would proceed as a normal RFP would. It comes in, you have somebody review the RFP and say, we don't have your sophomore transcript or whatever in the file. Please send that along. Okay, it's ready, and then at the time when there's either the city or Sam Sanders or council so directs or whatever instrument says, let's start considering them. We now have enough. Let's start pushing it out. The city then undertakes that process.
I would never want to assume anything. Can we have verification on that?
On what?
That would happen?
That they would review, that they would start, if we're going to start receiving.
It's not just
applications-
going to be held
Yep.
until allocation time. Somebody's going to be looking at them in the meantime.
Could
Not to
could
make
Brenda,
judgment.
or
Brenda,
Administrative,
could Brenda or Erin or speak on how the process is now?
I can speak on the process. The way the process has been in the past was the NOFA was written up with a time frame for applications and submittals and review and city council approval. It had some criteria about what the application should contain and what the application should be for. And that was pretty much it from what I remember. Again, just a reminder, I'm sure you all remember that a separate subcommittee with members that weren't able to receive funds was put together to evaluate the proposals. And the proposals were submitted to that subcommittee for a public meeting to evaluate. And then the recommendation went to the city council for approval.
right. And I guess what you're asking, Lisa, I think is there going to be an administrative process to make sure somebody hasn't put in something that just isn't complete and we've wasted everybody's time because it's just sitting there. And I don't think that's unreasonable to have somebody flip through it and say, yeah, we don't have page 4, finish page 4. But I don't know if, to me, that
So
seems a
when-
common sense.
So if the proposal
administrative
is,
procedure.
sorry, but I'm sorry, I don't want, I'm not trying to be rude or cut you off. I'm sorry. Are you done?
Well, I mean, like you, I can keep going forever. So, step on in.
Wow, shade, shade, shade. Mm-mm-mm.
Merry Christmas, Joy.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
So,
But anyway, but there was staff who was reviewing those proposals, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Staff would go through the proposals and determine if they
That's
were
what I was looking for.
complete or could be reviewed.
that's part of the normal administrative
Thank
process.
you, Brenda.
Um,
You're welcome, Joy.
Mr. Chair, point of order, we don't have a second on the table yet. Can we get a second to that motion? so
I
we can continue to
seconded. I
You did.
seconded.
You did. I didn't hear
I
you.
did.
I'm
I
sorry.
did.
Okay. I
Thanks,
withdraw
Dan.
my comment.
I would suggest the recommending city council CAF funds, the city solicit proposals for existing CAF funds as quickly as possible. Using existing procedures pending the updated data and pending the update from the consultants.
Perfect.
Okay. So.
Can I speak on
I'm
that motion?
seconding that.
Right, so let me, so motion amend, I'm just gonna stick this out there so we can see it. Nope, Lyle, you beat me to it. All right, that's it.
I just want to speak on that for a second, just in terms of proper order of things, not meeting order of things, but the money was allocated under a regime, flawed as it may have been. It was allocated under a regime with a set of rules and a procedure that were in place, and the city is every bit within its right to review that regime, the procedures, and make adjustments and make it better if we can. And I think we're all in support of that. I certainly support that. The money was allocated a year ago with rules and regimes and procedures. And so I guess what I'm saying is I support, in particular, I support the amendment to the motion because there is a process and a set of procedures in place. When the consultants come back with updates, earth shattering or not, that's additional information and data for staff and or review committee to keep in mind. But it's not as if there isn't a process, and it's not as if the money was allocated absent of a process, or the money was allocated and there was something in the motion, the resolution of council that said, we're going to allocate this, but we're going to wait to push it out there until we have data and new plans in place. And so this makes a ton of sense to me. What the city's doing makes a ton of sense to me as well. But business has to go on, and people are living in crummy housing, and we all have a solemn obligation to do something about that.
Right. Thank you, Dan. Further discussion, Alex, is your hand still up, or were those questions answered?
I'm good. I'm good.
Call for
Okay.
the question.
You
Yes,
guys
ma'am. Ma'am?
We need to vote.
Okay, no more questions. All right. We've got the motion in the chat. No further discussion. All in favor indicate by aye. Raising thumb.
Aye.
Aye.
I don't see, is there any dissent? I hear no dissent whatsoever. Motion passes. All right, watching the clock ticking away here, Brenda, do you have any intelligence as to county updates?
I do not. Stacy informed me that she had a county supervisors meeting, so she wouldn't be able to attend. I asked her if she had any updates, and she said not that she was able to get to me quickly.
Right, right. Gotcha. She's got her whip in her chair out. Got it. All right. Let's see. I believe that I think before we dive into Lyle's discussion of the CIP, quick updates on subcommittees. I think there are only two.
Do that, can I just say something? Because I don't know if Alice is gonna be on here for the whole duration of it in. But I do want to echo what Dan and Lisa said about home ownership. And I have echoed that on the committee that I sits on with UVA. And I still feel that there is a lot more that needs to be done with the community. The low income community doesn't really know much about what is going on. But because there is a lot of homeowners in the 10th and Page who are losing their home because of taxes or whatever, I do echo what Dan and Lisa says about home ownership. I want to make sure I get that in before you disappear off the screen.
Thank you, Joy. I hear you.
Holidays.
I'll share all the information with everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, please let JJ know that I reiterated that again today.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you again. As far as subcommittee reports go, I think I can summarize them pretty quickly. There are two items that the Public Policy Subcommittee was addressing. Item number one was a tax abatement program revision. We can speak to that a little more, but the short version of that is that the Policy Subcommittee did meet on that a couple of times. We sent off the recommendations to the city's attorney and staff are working on that. And I believe Ridge and I have a meeting scheduled for the first week of January to sort of discuss how many laws we broke and, trying to clean up the details of that for a sort of polished presentation. And then the other piece of that was that Deputy City Manager Sanders asked us to provide an order of battle for implementation of the affordable housing program, sort of what we need to do right now, what we need to do in the spring, and what we need to do after that. Based on our two meetings, I provided a summary of that I guess we met last at September 29th. That weekend, I shot out a rough cut to Sam and said, let me know if this is the structure you're actually looking for and get back to me. That was, by Mr. Sanders' own admission, was designed to talk about resources with Mr. Boyles. And at approximately the time I was going to follow up with Sam, we got news that Mr. Boyles was leaving, so I figured things were a little sideways there. So I've not yet had feedback on that. So I think that's what's going on with subcommittees. Ridge, you've got your hand up. Did I miss anything critical, or do you have something else?
I did have something else. Just you covered the policy subcommittee work. Just waiting for feedback on what we've sketched out. I just wanted to again echo the comments about home ownership. And first of all, I want to say to Alice and UVA, it's an incredible thing that you all have done, moving this thing forward. And I know that it has been very difficult to get to this point, and just know that all of the suggestions that we have for you are just ways that we can think of taking that incredible gesture and making the most out of it. So thank you for what you all are doing. I would note Dan was worried about greasing his own skids. I would just note that 78% of our job seekers, and we've now served over 1,200 of them, 78% of our job seekers have said they are interested in home ownership. So it's a very universal, American dream, and it is reflected in our job seekers who are seeking home ownership. And lastly, I would say that I'm a co-chair of another working group alongside affordable housing, and I'm hoping that as this housing is developed by whomever develops it, that there will be an opportunity and an insistence that there is a local hiring provision made that says that if there are jobs that are generated from the creation of this housing, that like the Section 3 process, that local people are given an opportunity to get those jobs with whoever gets the opportunity to develop. So just wanted to put that out there, and it'll be part of our recommendations coming from Pipelines and Pathways, I think. But I just wanted to make sure that these working groups get in sync with each other, and I think they are. So thank you.
And I just, I do have to jump off at one, but thank you for those comments. And Ridge, I think that's an excellent point that, we'll continue to drive home. Sorry, the screen keeps moving around. And then I also just want to remind everybody that, there is a commitment for, the support of 1,000 to 1,500, units over 10 years. This is our first step with these 3 sites. So, I would just ask that you be a little patient with us and say that we haven't failed if we haven't sorted out every issue, at this first round. But, I think we're moving in a positive direction, and we have to look at additional sites as well to get to ultimately get there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jo-
Thank you. Thank you,
thank
Ridge.
ma'am. And thanks for being able to hang for the first hour. Joy, you have your hand up, and I thought
So
John's
I
hand went up.
agree with everything Rich says, but please put affordable, truly affordable. Because what's being built now it's not truly affordable to our folks. So I also want to put that on the table, because since I've been here, I've been asking y'all to please define affordability. It haven't been done. UVA got to do that. City got to do that. And saw Mr. Sales hands up, but it went down. I don't know if touch base. So I'm supporting what you said, Ridge. Just please put in affordable, truly affordable.
I gotta switch. Mr. Chair, I'm gonna switch to another meeting.
John Sales, did you have your hand up, or is that a?
I did, but we're all good.
All right, thank you, sir. If there's no further discussion on that, I guess I'd just like to ask, so Lyle, what you been up to?
I was up late last night. Had a public meeting, capital improvement plan last night. There were many motions made, and I've got a rough draft that Missy Creasy was kind enough to share with me. I can't swear to them, but this is our best guess currently. The one that most relevant to this group: allocate any surplus funding to any unfunded affordable housing requests to include Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund. Very vague, very broad, but I hope of some use. There was some concern about feasibility on that. There was a lot of thought about moving money from bondable projects. The CAF is not bondable. So is this even real? Do we need some resources that are not bondable to actually do this? That's not clear at this time, and staff is busily working a way to figure that out. I'm interested in the thoughts of this group on this topic.
Point of order, the proposed land bank ordinance provides for the bonding and raising of funds that can be used in very versatile ways. That the one that's been complete for a couple of years and just needs to be dressed up and presented to council.
Could that happen?
I've asked.
That would be good.
Yes, sir. Sorry, go
on. Thoughts on this topic? Sources of revenue. Did we do good? Did we make a mistake the council needs to know about?
So are you talking about the CIP in general, this particular piece of the action?
This particular piece is on my mind.
We have a piece of it we can look at, or is there something we can?
I'm sorry to say that I've given you the entire thing. Those documents are, let's see. Here we are. Planning Commission work session packet, and also just a series of gobbledygook.
Gobbledygook was the thing you wanted me to start with on a given page, I think.
That the gobbledygook starts with Ms. Hamill's memo, which sort of lays out where everything stands.
Lyle, can I jump in? 'Cause I need to jump off for a second, but I
Please.
watched this. I watched the session last night, and
I'm sorry.
needed clarification. From the conversation at the end when the motion was made about reallocation of funding for affordable housing, what the commissioners said and what their motion was, I think may be in conflict with each other. Basically, what the commissioners said was that they didn't want to specify which projects, that they sort of wanted money dumped into the CAF. And so that it became a competitive process to get the best projects. What the motion said was fund things that were in the unfunded list. And I don't read the CAF as unfunded. What I saw as unfunded are things like LIHTC, PHA LIHTC, potentially rehab. I don't have the list in front of me.
CRHA LIHTC.
Yeah, am I misunderstanding, Lyle, that, or is that your understanding as well?
That is why I requested the exact language, because it was unclear to me. And looking at it, it is unclear.
Yeah, so I think it was late at night, but I really appreciate all the work that y'all put into it. But I do think that if you look at the tape, what they said and what the motion was were two opposite things. I think the intent was dump money into the CAF and get the best projects. And again, what the motion was pull from the unfunded list. And the problem with that is that there was never any request put out there in the community so that things could be unfunded to start with. You know what I mean? So there was never any process or so you don't know what's unfunded because there was never any question put out there. And so as chair, I'm hoping that as chair, you'll go back and kind of clarify. And I know that there's a note that's written to council as it moves forward to them, sort of clarifying the intent. And I'm just hoping that you'll sort of be on top of that. And at least if I'm misunderstanding it, that's fine. But I at least want to make sure that the intent of planning commissioners is what moves forward and potentially not what the motion is.
Thank you. Other thoughts on this topic? Mr. Meyer, please.
I can look at it. I haven't seen it, so I have to go look at it. I was doing a different meeting. I had a conflict, so. But you all know how I feel about affordable housing.
Lyle, I'll chip. Joy, if you're done, I'll go. And looks like you are. Great. Well, I obviously would like to see money in the CIP for affordable housing in order to implement the affordable housing plan. I think that's important. I did make some observations around revenue and where we get revenue to pay for the CIP, and I guess indirectly or directly then affordable housing. I do think, and this is something I maybe chair, I might suggest the sub-policy committee tackle, is to review if we're going to adequately fund the CIP and investing on affordable housing. We're likely to need to raise revenue, which the levers we have to raise revenue for the city, sales taxes, fees, property taxes being the biggest one, et cetera. And obviously property tax raising also has impacts on housing affordability and other things. So I was wondering, and maybe this would be, and bounce this off you, Lyle, and I don't know if the Planning Commission has thought much about this, and has observations around, where should revenue come from and what are the potential unintended consequences of different sources of revenue in relation to, right, if we raise a lot of money from property taxes, for example, which I personally think is the way to go versus, let's say, a sales tax. However, what are the implications on affordable housing and other housing in general for our city? So I would like to, because that was likely to be part of the conversation, I think, obviously for council also, if they're going to adequately fund the CIP, where might the Housing Advisory Committee or Resource Sub Policy Committee, be able to provide some observations on, tax policy, you might say, in order to fund this?
Hey, Chris, your audio is sort of getting quieter and quieter there. I think the more you lean back in contemplation, the farther away from the mic you are.
I need to get right straight in the camera like you do, Phil. And that was a great, really thoughtful, lengthy, I won't say diatribe, but thought. Lyle, did you catch it enough?
I got every word. It was beautiful. Thank you.
See, you need a system like Lyle, Chair.
Well, I was actually responding to a couple of folks saying, "What's he saying?" in the chat,
Okay.
but that's all right.
Okay. And
And I've turned off, since I do have a face made for radio, I've turned off my video.
All right. So to summarize, I do think it's in my understanding of what's coming out of the CIP. We have a lot of things in there that around affordable housing that need to be funded. We need to raise revenue to do that. How we raise revenue could also impact the actual housing situation in the community. And it would be good to maybe have the sub policy committee on the HAC take a look at, what does actually raising the property tax thing do, and where are the programs we have to minimize the impact of property tax raises, and or how would we handle that in order, though, to raise revenue enough to subsidize the affordable housing that we need.
Are you saying you want to avoid desperate impact on decisions for revenue? I'm trying to understand the point.
Yeah, I think we want to understand and provide some guidance or advice to the council on if we use property tax revenues, what does that mean to pay for the increase in the CIP for the affordable housing we want?
Specifically, I guess, to be clear, within the context of if that's a lever we're going to pull and start doing something with property taxes, we need to know the second order consequences. So that's an enormous if, of course, even in this environment, but point taken. And of course, that's also an IAT thing too, but yes, sir. All right, anyway. Any other thoughts, Lyle, on your? Oh.
No, just based on what Chris was just asking. Michael Payne has his hands up. I was gonna say, why don't we ask Councilor Payne? And there's the other new counselor is on here too. Won't we ask both of them?
Mr. Payne, please.
Yeah, as I discussed last night and have before, I think the elephant in the room is just that our current CIP is not affordable. Just to summarize, as is our current CIP with a 10-cent property tax increase, a real estate tax increase, locks out any new CIP projects for 5+ years and also freezes up our general fund separate from the CIP. So again, that is with a 10-cent tax increase, not without it. And it also means that our funding for affordable housing and other priorities drops off a cliff in a couple years. So it goes to zero, again, with a 10 cents tax increase. So I think the real decision point is, one, we either get a sales tax from the General Assembly that solves that issue, or two, we make substantial cuts to the CIP and prioritize affordable housing and other things we want to make a priority. But there is no solution for how to make this affordable without one of those two options. And I think that's just continues to be the situation we face. And I would also just mention that, the other challenges with the 10-cent tax increase, that can be partially offset in terms of tax relief, but there's a strict limit from the General Assembly on the value of your home that can qualify. So even though we've been expanding that program, fewer and fewer people qualify each year because the assessments rise and people are kicked out of the program. And will the General Assembly change that? Maybe, but point being, it's not as easy to get to a progressive tax that way as some may assume. And again, I think that's the reality of the decision we make. And either we get the sales tax increase or make substantial cuts to other areas. if we want to maintain our affordable housing commitments, which I think we absolutely must do. But those are the only routes I see to being able to accomplish that.
Thank you. Other thoughts on this topic?
Can we hear from Juan?
Mr. Wade?
Yes? Can
I stepped away and I just got back. What am I agreeing to or disagreeing with? I need to get the hang of this before I say, yes, of course.
Well, we don't know, but broadly, we're talking about the capital improvement program. It's big, it's expensive. We have a commitment for $10 million a year in housing funds. This CIP doesn't do that. It drops off a cliff in FY 27. Oh God, what do we do? Can you solve it?
Yeah. I know I've learned one thing, and that's not to make any commitments until I really know what's in the cupboard. I can tell you that, we have a commitment for the schools, and that's something we definitely, because I know I've been on the school board 16 years, and so many times I've been in that position. We're saying, okay, we appreciate your support. We know that project is very important, so we're staying in line. And I think that we've gotten to the point that this project has gone from 55 million to about 70 million because we've kept waiting in line. So I will commit that I understand housing is important and we need to do what we can. We need to also see what Albemarle counties, if we're doing 7 to 10 million, what are they doing? What are other localities doing? Because we need to make sure that the money that we're doing, commitment that we're doing towards affordable housing will be certainly addressing the needs for Charlottesville residents. We're not, since the only one doing it, that everywhere attracting advocates, people seeking affordable housing from other localities as well. So we just need to make sure it's a regional approach, and we're not the only one that's doing it. But schools, we've made a commitment to them, and they have been waiting patiently, but I think that they're going to be getting a lot more vocal, just as the housing groups are. So it's a big pot. We need to make sure everyone gets some. And, I'm going to come in, and I've heard from over the last 30 days, a lot of the departments that's knocking at the door, not as loud, but they have a lot of commitments and as well. So Michael, I don't know how you've done it for the last 2 years. I've been doing it for about a month unofficially. And, but I think that we all love and care for this city. And I think that with that, we should be able to do it, but we just have to realize that it's not that if we are patient and realize that if we wait for the money to become available, I think that we can address it all, but we just can't do it all at once. And I think schools have been waiting a long time.
People have been waiting too. I'm sorry, I just said poor people have been waiting too.
Well, poor people go to school too. They go to our public schools.
And I agree. Those are the people that I am also fighting for, the shelter for the kids. When I talk about poor people, I'm talking about the kids. The reason why moms have low income housing is because they have children. But we ain't gonna argue about this to one. We will meet one-on-one, and then we'll talk and go over that. But
I don't think there's anything to argue about. We all moving.
But what I do want to say to you is that even with the city program, with the vouchers, that the city has committed to put money in for the vouchers, Albemarle County pushed back on those. So good luck. They're having folks with vouchers in Albemarle County is having the hardest time finding place or getting places to rent in Albemarle County. They're pushing back on them. And so I'm glad to hear you say you want to see what other localities are doing, but we need help in that also because, the city's investing money. They can't find anything in the city. They go to the county and they get pushed back. So just wanted to put that on your radar.
Mr. Wade, did you need to finish your thought?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. That was helpful. Mr. Payne, please.
Yeah, just one last thought from me to add on to what I said. As people consider how to fund our housing commitments, another point that I think is important that is not reflected in the CIP and budget documents is that we know over the next couple years there will be an additional $10 million plus bill that is going to come from our fire department, our schools, having paid for permanent recurring expenditures with one-time stimulus money from the federal government that the city will have to pick up, combined with the fact that the city is going to need to do a wage and compensation study, which could very possibly result in wage increases for every employee across the city. And so those bills together are easily $10 million plus. That is not currently reflected and has to be incorporated. So again, I would just say, to fund housing, which to me is the top priority and we must do, we've got to face some difficult realities and recognize that there are real trade-offs that we have to evaluate and make decisions on to make that happen. The only win-win short-term solution I see is, again, that sales tax increase authorized by the General Assembly, which would be, I believe, over $10 million a year directly to school buildings. I believe that would pay for not only the proposed school reconfiguration, but also additional school infrastructure needs and would completely alleviate a big part of the pressure we're seeing. So I would encourage everyone to try to do everything they can this General Assembly session to advocate for that. And to the extent that we can, try to build coalition partners, because I know there are a lot of schools in Southwest Virginia too that are in desperate need of renovation. And it's a long shot, but maybe there are some legislators in Southwest Virginia and throughout the state who are going to want to, see a sales tax increase also being allowed in their localities. But yeah, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, Chair. I don't think, and I hope we're never, and I don't think where people are going on, we're putting affordable housing versus education and necessarily making them compete against each other. So as Juan said, and Joy said, low income people need housing and they need education, and the city should be delivering I think equal opportunities for them around that. And so to me, it is, we need to find sources of revenue to make sure we need to pay for those things. And looking at that dive as the CIP has it for affordable housing out in 2027, I would like to suggest, and Chair Lyle or over at the Planning Commission, maybe it'd be interesting for the Housing Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission to have, I want to call it an informal conversation, but others who'd want to discuss taxing and potential sources of revenue and model out some, what do we need to have and how are we actually taxing ourselves compared to others also, to understand, because my understanding is our property tax rate is about 20% below the median for other cities and municipalities in the state. So, are we even taxing ourselves properly, like other cities are, to provide the minimum amount of services? And anyways, Chair, and sorry, Chair Phil, I'm not trying to get too ahead of myself, but I do think that'd be interesting maybe to have the policy subcommittee to review that with the Planning Commission and do some analysis around that in order to inform the council conversation decisions around the CIP and property tax raises potentially, in March or April.
Just very quickly, I do think that a joint PC hack work session is long overdue. I have hesitated to put that forward considering the wild-eyed desperation in the eyes of the planning commissioners over the past several months. But I think that we should probably encourage the chair of the HAC and the chair of the planning commission to sort of figure out if they can schedule up a joint work session sometime in relatively early 22. They're both a bit irascible, but I think they can cooperate on this.
Very good. Mr. Payne?
Just again, I will metaphorically pound the table and make this point one last time, that those numbers of assuming of our current CIP completely freezing out all new CIP projects freezing out our general fund is with a 10-cent tax increase assumed, which does take us to the level of Northern Virginia and the highest levels in the state. That is assuming we do that. We are still falling off a cliff for affordable housing funding in the out years, completely freezing the CIP. So there's no room for new housing projects. There's no room if there's an emergency need that we can't delay, such as we find a critical bridge repair is needed, or like with Smith Aquatic Center, that there were air quality issues that needed to be fixed. And there's also no room in the general fund to pay for new staff, deferred staff requests. And that is not incorporating the $10 million plus bill we know is coming from one-time permanent expenditures made with one-time funding. That is with a 10-cent sales tax, or not sales tax, 10-cent real estate tax increase. And so I'll just pound the table again and say it one last time. We have got to look at these numbers as they are, not as we want them to be.
I appreciate that, Michael, because CRHA has, we've started redeveloping. We're planning on 6th Street now. And we're starting to, move towards planning for West Haven, which that's one of our that's our biggest site, and it's a political site, and it's gonna take a lot of planning. And so, yes, that is kind of concerning to me because CRHA is gonna need the help. Tax credit alone is not going to provide deeply affordable housing for folks, and that's what's needed. So I hear you, and I know Foreign Legal Aid is going to be talking about this in CRHA to figure out, what we can suggest.
Additional discussion on this topic? I would entertain a motion if anyone has anything on that. Can I do that?
Sure, why not?
Ha 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 ha. Delegated power.
So is there a motion to be contemplated here? Do you want to make a motion, sir?
I've heard a couple thoughts. One was that the policy subcommittee look at revenue. One was that the Housing Advisory Committee and Planning Commission talk about this stuff next year. Those both seem reasonable to me. Mr. Schuyler, would you be willing to speak to the first thought?
We're always happy to look at issues. It takes a long time, seems, to land any of these planes, but we'd be happy to add our voices into the mix about what we might be able to do. I mean, I think Michael has laid out a pretty stark set of choices, and absent moving to away from local real estate taxes to an income tax system across the state, I think we're really in a bind. But I do think looking at bonding options and other options that might be out there would be worth exploring, and we'd be happy to do it. Given enough time to work on it.
Okay. Lyle, I mean, if we want to I think that we don't really need a formal motion, but I guess we can make one saying, let's have the subcommittee look at that.
I so moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Taking the gavel back for a second. Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Are we moving for, may I ask something when you talk
yes,
about
ma'am.
subcommittees?
Sorry.
Are we moving? I'm sorry?
I said, yes, ma'am.
Are we moving forward with the current makeup of subcommittees, or is that changed at all, or how's that happening for 2022?
Your chair owes everyone a round of who's on what subcommittee, and are we playing any musical chairs? That's that has been on your chair's agenda frequently, and is still on the agenda of his to-do list. I'm sorry, I need to get that out, but we are going to continue with until the hack gets reorganized and shortened and shrunk. We are where we are.
Is that in accordance with any bylaws that we follow? in
Yes.
terms of people serving on and how long they serve?
Yes. There is no limit to the time you serve on a given subcommittee in particular. There is some movement around, but we need to refresh that. I mean, like everything else, it's been sort of knocked sideways by Zoom World and Corona. But that's on my list. It was something that I neglected to do, which was actually mentioned in the last meeting. So my fault. But back to the motion on the table in favor of having policy subcommittee taking a look at this. Any further discussion of that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
No opposition, passes. Okay, Ridge, if you could look at scheduling something in January for that. And then the second thought of the idea, let me hand this back to Lyle. Go ahead. We're looking at the joint session and other things.
Mr. Meyer?
And Lyle, I'll just, being one of the persons that's helping push this, I'm willing to help. Just let me know and we'll help engage. Thanks.
So noted, thank you. Second item was follow up on a possible joint session. I'm happy to speak with Chair Duranzio on that topic.
Great. Chair Duranzio, happy to speak with Vice Chair Sully Yates / Chair Sully Yates. All right, done. Anything further you want to hit on the CIP at this point, Lyle, or have you hit the high spots you wanted to?
Thank you. This was very helpful.
Thank you. Any other business before I turn to potential public content comment? Sir.
Chair, I do have an update if we're
Go ahead.
right. So many of you might remember the HAC did some analysis on short-term rentals about 2 years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, right before COVID, or it landed kind of a report. I have noticed, and I'll put this in the chat, but there's a bill now that's going through the General Assembly that will modify code and make short-term rental companies like Airbnb report to and potentially collect all the lodging taxes that happen and on a monthly basis report that all and give the money and report who's renting and where and for how long and for how much to the Commissioner of Revenues, which would in theory again provide the information then for zoning and the Commissioner of Revenue to basically better track what's happening and if zoning is the short-term rental rules are being followed. So the Commissioner of Revenue Divers is let me know that potentially interested in the analysis that we did. And again, there might be progress. The bill is being sponsored and the patron is actually Republican Ware out of Powhatan. So it is likely to be bipartisan, and I know Delegate Hudson is interested in co-sponsoring or supporting it. So there is likelihood to see potential progress on that next year on that topic.
Quick question on that, and is this a sort of enabling legislation for localities to produce ordinances to chase this, or is this going to be a state law mandating that it gets done everywhere to locals?
I think my read on it, and I will again, the initial bill is that it will mandate the short-term rental companies to report information to the cities and the municipalities. If that makes
So
sense.
it's not, so it's well, okay. I look forward to that industry.
What they do with it is up to them.
Yeah. I look forward to the industry's legislative and litigative response to that proposed legislation, but okay, that should be interesting.
That also should help generate some revenue for us because all those people who are not paying taxes right now.
Not disagreeing.
Will happily start to capture all that. So
yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you at all, sir. Any other S. Lisa, ma'am, your hand.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear what Chris is saying. Maybe because he's leaned back again. But you were talking, and I apologize. Maybe I'm just getting old, Chris. You were mentioning Airbnb and someone bringing a bill forward about making sure that they reveal the information that they've collected. Is that correct?
So
You don't have to repeat it all. I'm just looking for a
Yeah,
general
there's
consensus. And do you have a bill number? And who is
Yes.
carrying the bill?
Delegate Ware, I will post it in the chat. Okay. Sorry for not enunciating into my computer enough. I need to get the headphones myself and speaker maybe. And it will basically mandate, right, the Airbnb and other short-term rental companies report monthly who and where the short-term rentals are happening in each municipality to the Royalton Commissioner of Revenues.
That's gonna be very interesting. I definitely want to see that bill number.
All right. I'll post it here in a second. Sorry for
Okay, thank you.
everybody. Hopefully I heard me that time.
Any further business before I turn to public comment? All right. Ms. Wilkins, do you have any public comment? I believe that's the only member of the public that hung for us the whole time. Okay. Anything else? Chair will now entertain any motion.
I move to go home.
Motion to adjourn?
That's the
Second,
one.
That's the one.
third, second, fourth,
Third.
whatever.
Fourth, fifth.
Any discussion?
I need a fifth.
Yeah, well, so do
Happy
I.
holidays to y'all and Merry Christmas.
All in
Happy
favor?
New Year, all of it.
All, thank you very much. Once again, we've managed to stumble through another trip around the sun. Glad you're all still here with us.
I feel like Icarus.
Here,
Bye. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
holidays.